Hello, hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunshine Wednesday over here. I'm not gonna lie, folks. As you know, Laura and I always have a little conversation before we start, and I am very excited for today's show because it is gonna be magical. If it is your first time joining us, my name is Sadie Uriban. I'm the media producer for Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, do you like how I started off so like OMG and then I got into my very professional SBDC
I
voice?
do like it. And I just threw something in the chat. Hopefully, I typed it with no typos. I was typing while you were speaking and saying, hey guys, this show is your show. I was telling Sadie before we started, and I'll give you the upcoming and all the things I do. But I was thinking about actually canceling. I told you that, canceling this week because of it being a short week. Tried to get some guests coming on. Everybody had holidays. I hate to have guests on because I know it's not as many people here, so they don't get to experience it. So I said, okay, I'm going to cancel. And I said, you know what? If anything, I'm going to say happy Thanksgiving, or we're going to talk for 60 minutes. Whatever happens today happens. So you guys, anything you want to talk about, I told Sadie, we're going to do fun things if you want to put it. And Sadie's monitoring the chat as always. I got the Q&A. But if you want to put in there, what is the most exciting thing somebody's doing on the holiday? Do you want me to ask a question? As you always know, I'm an open book. You can ask me personal things. You can ask me professional things. I'm just going to ramble on. Thank you, Kim. That is so sweet. I love it. Well, let me get started with just my announcements on the webinars. First of all, can you guys believe it's the end of the year? And I'm really looking forward to it. I feel like I need some time off. It's been a crazy year. I'll talk about this in a minute, but it's been a crazy year, so I'm kind of glad. But here we go with the end of the year webinars. So I'm going to do all of the webinars I always do. I'm cramming them in because I know a lot of times people want to catch them. They're not recorded. Some people may have more time during December, etc. So I decided to just throw them in there as much. Richard, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So this is my upcoming shows for December because we'll have three and then we'll be off for the holidays. I'm having Ramin come back on. I don't know. It's been probably 2 or 3 months. I can't remember. He was on and he talked about social media. Really is delving into all the metrics and a lot of times people talk about social media and they're kind of on the surface. He's really deep into it and he gave so much great information and advice. I promised that I would have him back on and finally got around to doing so. December 10th, I have somebody that's coming on. I don't have all his information yet, so I'm just kind of saying it this way. But him and his wife created a brick and mortar daycare center and they've had the trials and tribulations and learned so much along the way. I was talking with him the other day and I was like, you know what? You've got enough wisdom already. Come on the show and share it with us. And he's gonna said he'd be glad to. So I just hit him up yesterday. Didn't have enough time to get all the information, but that's kind of what's coming up. And then, of course, Dahlia. Everybody loves Dahlia. I've asked her to close us out for the year. Just giving kind of an overview from a bookkeeping standpoint, getting ready for year end. Because, like I said, it's so much easier to do your year end information when you have it in front of you. When you come back after the holidays, January, or if you wait until somewhere around March, you're not going to remember what numbers are, etc. So it's a good idea to, I guess, the expression of getting all your ducks in an order. And remember that if you are being taxed as an S corp, remember I said taxed, if you're taxed as an S corp, you have to have a W-2 salary. It's under the reasonable salary rule, and that will have to be paid out by December 31st. So I've had a couple people recently say, okay, I'm trying to figure out this S corp, what should be my W-2? And I'm like, whoa. Whoa, stop there, guys. Stop there. I'm going to actually take off share because you don't need to see this. The Once you chose to be taxed as an S corp, okay, it's my personal professional opinion. Once you chose to be taxed as an corp, you did not get to take the DIY accounting package off the shelf. The S Corps are their whole other animal, and you've got to meet with a tax preparer before year end so they can look at the numbers to make sure you get the W-2. The tax form has to be filed on March for the S Corp. So a lot of people have changed to this S Corp, not realizing it's a whole nother animal. And I always tell people that when you look at the cost for an S Corp, that's why you have to reach a certain amount of net income to make it even tax effective, if you couldn't say it that way. Not only is it that you're paying extra taxes, so you have to wait until that balance is out, but you also have extra admin fees. So be very conscious if you're an S Corp that you've got to get that in before the end of the year. Okay, let's get started. I see, Sadie, you monitor the chat in case people put their questions into the chat. I'm going to monitor the Q&A. I know you always do, Sadie, so I don't even have to tell you that. Okay, Anonymous, should I do something different about a inf I'm not sure what you mean before shop. I start in California or for taxes if I'm selling in other states. Can you tell me, Anonymous, can you check that? I'm not sure what you're saying by an inflict shop. I don't know what that means. So write it down and I'll come back and catch up with you, okay? I'm just not sure what you're saying there. Next, Anonymous, should I look to see if the email is available first or fictitious names? Okay, when you talk about a fictitious name, if you want the email to match up with the fictitious name, and what you're saying really is a domain. You're wanting a domain. I believe that's what you're asking me, right? So you want to make sure if you call your company, I'll call it Lori's Great Company. If I call it Lori's Great Company, I want to make sure I have a domain Lori's Great Company. So when you say if I should look for first, you got to look for both. Because if you want those to match, you have to go and check on the DBA to see if it matches. And then you also have to check on the domain to make sure the domain's available. So if you guys just bear with me a second, I'm multitasking here. I'm going to put into in just a second here. Give me a second. I'm going to put into the chat because that's where I have to drop things in, how you go about looking that up. So give me 1 second and I will show you what I'm talking about because many people don't know how to do this. So I just drop there. Okay, so I am going to put this into the chat right now. You'll see it fly in there right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so you know what I'm talking about here. So when you go to the site that I just gave you into the chat, see, you can enter Lori's Great Company and I can then do a search and I can see if it's available. No, it's not. Then I can go to the domain. So what I'm literally saying is it's so easy to do both and you got to do both. Otherwise, you don't know if it's going to both be available. Okay? So I think I got that one. Let's see. If my business name is taken by a gamer and it is a name of a song, but no one else uses it as a business name, does my name have to include shop to differentiate? I get what you're asking me now. So here's the deal, Anonymous. It's so funny. Whenever I talk, I always got to go, in this case, but in this case, but in this case. It's like nothing can be a straight answer when you're talking about legal tax or anything accordingly. So this is why I'm saying this. There is a law in California regarding LLCs, and I say in California because remember, LLCs are by state statute. If I get time, I'll tell you why that is. So that's why I have to say California because each state has its own rule, right? But there's a law in California. It just came out a little bit ago because they were trying to make sure that someone didn't just change one word, which is what we're talking about here, just didn't change one word and then take that name, right? So when you are doing a LLC, it's very clear in the law that you have to choose a name. And I can't remember the exact legal terms. I'm pretty close, but I'll tell you in slang what it means, that the name can't be seen as similar or be confused as similar. It has to be a completely unique name. So one of the things that they're totally against in the LLC is taking an existing name and adding the word after it, one word after it, right? Okay, so now I'm going a little deeper, guys, going a little deeper, okay? Now, what this is going to be confusing to some and ask if you need more. When we say the name is taken, okay, we also have to understand what exactly does that mean. So a lot of times people mistakenly believe that if they name an LLC a name, right, that that name is theirs and no one else can have it. Now, that is a true statement in the following. No one else can have an LLC in California under that name, right? No one else can have a corporation under that name. That doesn't mean the DBA can't be that name. That's the kind of part that's the pits because the DBA database is by county and that name is by state. And so I could have an LLC with that same name in another state, right? So you also have to have into the picture is that when you're saying the name is taken, where is it taken? How is it taken? Is it trademarked? Once again, like I say, it always goes back to the fact that these are layers and layers of understanding. And I express to people when I meet them one on one so they kind of understand this concept is when you hear me speak, when you hear me explain something, I, although am speaking in one language and you're hearing me blend all this stuff together, technically I speak three languages because being an enrolled agent, a tax preparer by the US Treasury, I speak tax language, right? Totally know how to speak tax language. Having been a CFO, a banker around investment banking, I obviously speak finance, well, script in that. And I've been the legal structure resident expert for decades. I've read the charters, I've read everything. So I'm pretty studied up, even more so than some lawyers on this. So when I speak to you, I'm looking at it from a unique angle. For example, if you asked a lawyer the question, they're only asking a legal question. If you asked a tax person, like a S corp, should I become an S corp? The tax person's going to look at it one way. The CFO that knows what accounting has to be done is going to look at it a different way, and then the legal person might say it differently. So you get kind of all these answers. And in the olden days, you would have somebody that was your lawyer, somebody was your accountant, somebody was your bookkeeper, and you would do what I call a lot, in my soapbox thing, stay in their own lane. So this is what it was like when I was younger in business. If I went to a lawyer and asked him a question, they go, "This is it, but you got to ask your accounting person from that perspective." I go to the account, make sure you talk to the lawyer to get that. Make sure you tell the bookkeeper what you're doing. They made sure that you realize you were the responsible party for getting all this data together and making an informed decision. Today, when you're looking at things, especially online, you're only seeing this point or a piece of this. And then if you take it verbatim, you don't really get the whole picture. And basically, what you're not getting is the right answer for you in your situation. And it's much more complicated than it ever has been. That's why I say to you guys, you really can't get information off of like Chat GPT to give you a final answer, data, but not a final answer. And you have to be really have discernment about who you're getting the information from and what perspective. Now, I bring up my background not to really state that I got this background, but more for you to understand that I'm literally speaking three different languages. And when I speak with people on a one-on-one giving advice, I'm always like, from a legal perspective, from a tax, so they understand I switched into a different language. So even something as simple as a name, you can see it's like, well, is it an LLC? Is it a DBA? Is it in this state, etc.? So the answer to the question is you really have to look at, what it is that the name is. But at the end of the day, okay, I went all over that, right? At the end of the day, this is what I always stress. It's very, very advantageous to simply pick a very unique name. Nobody's going to want to take it. And so many people are spending totally money they shouldn't on trademarks and all this. Like somebody thinks you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Honeys, you may be someday. You're not now. Right now, you're broke. You need money for marketing. Don't get all involved in these trademark stuff. Just market so you can become something someday. So you got the money to pay a lawyer to do the proper trademarks. Okay. So just be unique with the name and nobody's going to want it. And nobody probably wants it anyway. Okay. Next question. Should I do something different about an online shop? I start in California for taxes if I'm selling to other states. So, Monica, once again, deep question. So, I'm going in all the areas. And if there's a particular part that you meant to ask, please let me know. So, first of all, when we are doing business, and doing business sounds like a slang, but it's actually a legal term. So, doing business could be I'm sitting at my kitchen table and I'm selling on Etsy. I am literally engaging in business. So that means I'm doing business in California. So by that, if I'm a sole prop, I don't have to do anything. But if I'm an LLC, I must be registered, either registered in California or set up as a foreign entity doing business in California, right? So many people fall into this complete BS, guys. Don't buy into this. Well, you need to start your company in Delaware or Wyoming, and then you're going to avoid California taxes. Hate to tell you. You want to avoid California taxes, you got to get your butt completely out of California. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that's the facts, guys. So when you're doing business in California, even if you register like in a Wyoming or Nevada, or all these crazy things people tell you about, what happens is you still got to do a foreign entity in California. And so then you're subject to the same fees, the same everything. I can't tell you. I was telling Sadie before we started, I'm so just exhausted because the amount of legal letters that clients are getting. I'm like, got 4 or 5 clients a week where the franchise tax board went in and noted that they didn't have a foreign entity. They're finding them for that. They're finding them for this. Literally, if you're going to even play with an LLC, make sure you know what you're doing because I got too many people crying every single week to find out they're 5,000 to 10,000 on an LLC. They opened in another state or they didn't know they had to file. They didn't know they didn't know. So these are things that you really have to have an understanding of what you're getting involved in, right? But going back to another aspect on Monica, so if you're selling and if you're in California, your company's in California, or you registered it someplace else, you still have to register in California. Now, I want to pick out another word you said, selling to other states, because you said taxes. And so, guys, when we say taxes, that's like, that's like saying something that is very generic. You got to find out and say, what taxes are we talking about? Are we talking about income tax? Are we talking about state tax? Are we talking about federal tax? Are we talking about self-employment taxes? Are we talking about sales tax? Are we talking about business license tax? I know. Do you ever feel like we're being taxed a lot? I could go on and on and on. Believe me, we're not short for a list of taxes. So when you say, well, to pay taxes or to save on taxes, you got to say to me, what taxes are we talking about? Now, why I'm pointing this out is if you're selling in other states, and that means you are selling something that perhaps it could be a service or a product is required to have sales tax collected in the other state. You have to be aware of a law that came out, I think like 2017, maybe 2018, and it's called Economic Nexus, which requires you to collect sales tax in other states and remit in other states depending on their laws. And I ran into this, and this is why I started doing the webinar that I have again at the end of the month and put that in again, Sadie, so Monica can see it. Are you charging or should you be charging your client sales tax? Because I saw so many people, what they did is they check a box on Shopify that says, oh yeah, I'm, going to have Shopify handle it. Well, you have to have knowledge to know that when you're talking about sales tax, there's 3 aspects. You have to calculate the amount, then you collect it by putting it on the invoice, and then it has to be remitted to the government authority in this state, another state, what have you, right? Shopify is not clear at all. What they're literally doing is they're calculating the amount and they're putting it on the invoice. So people are collecting it and they're putting it in their bank account. Okay, what does this mean? This means they don't even realize that happened. So legally, they're collecting sales tax without a seller's permit and keeping the money. Okay, I've seen people selling online and get hit with a fraud statement because they're legally collecting sales tax and keeping it. Platforms like Etsy and Amazon, they do collect it, but whenever you're using a platform, you have to look for calculate, collect, and the third word that's so friggin' important is remit, remit, remit. So, Monica, in your question, should I start do something different about an online shop? You start in California for taxes. You have to be aware of selling, selling sales tax. You have to make sure that's done correctly. And also, as far as personal taxes, you're in California, honey. You got to pay the personal taxes. Not a whole lot you can do there. Anonymous, I missed your discussion on how to correctly come up with prices for your products. Yeah, that one is best really, Anonymous, to properly answer that. I first want to say this. I'm going to give you a shortened version, right? But to properly answer that, you really want to take my CFO part one and part two webinars. I do it every month. I go into that. So what I'm going to just chat on that for a bit. What happens? I'm going to tell you what people technically do and why it's not correct. People will be told even by marketers, go and look at what the competitor's charging. Go and look at what the competitor's charging and charge whatever the competitor's charging, right? And, they'll say maybe be under or the market will pay for this or the market will pay for that. Now, there's validity from a marketing perspective. I'm not saying that doesn't have validity from a marketing perspective, but where it has no validity whatsoever, zero validity, none, niche, none, is can you afford to be selling it at that price? So imagine then I decide I want to buy a house. So I walk around this block and they're $2 million homes, and I see, oh, well, the stars have a $2 million home. I want a $2 million home. Okay, I'll go a little bit lower. I'll get a $1.5 million home. And I go out to everybody and say, I'm going to get a $1.5 million home. They're going to ask me, can you afford it? What's your expenses? How much money are you bringing in? Personally, we get this. Let's not even be extravagant with $1 million. I'm going to buy a new car. Well, what's the budget? Can you afford it? How much money do you have left over to pay the car? We get it personally. Businesses are no different. It still relies on the same monopoly game. More money has to come in than goes out, right? So when you look at a selling price, and this is where I create models, financial models to answer whether it's the right price, the price has to be high enough for you to be able to sell a certain number of widgets, whatever they are, to cover the cost of production, whether you're buying finished goods, raw material, whatever, cover the overhead expense, and have money left over at the end of the day. So just like I can't say, even if I turned around and I said, well, I make 150,000 so I can afford a car that costs this amount of money, but I don't consider any of my other bills, none of my other payments, not my mortgage, not any money at all. That's what this is like, saying I'm going to look at buying something but not consider any other usages of my funds. I'm just going to say, well, I make this money so I can. And it's the same equation, and this is why you can't answer a question like am I selling at a high enough price without putting it into a model and doing the math. One of the absolute shows that I love was when Ashley Arnold came on and talked about lady cakes. Sadie, if you happen to be able to pull that up and put in chat, I know that's really asking a lot right now while you're there, but if you happen to. But she talked about going through my part one and part two and the financial model and how it told her she was not charging high enough prices. And this is where I could, show her the model and say, hey, you know what? You will be more tired and more broke. Now, what do I mean by that? So what happens is, like, if you look at it, if you're selling it at a certain price, and you then find out that you got to sell this amount of widgets in order to meet enough of a sales volume to cover the expense while you're increasing in sales because we're not big manufacturer conveyor belts and economies of scale. We're even if we're making something, it's very labor intensive, right? So while the selling price is going up or your sales, the cost to produce is going right up with it. And if you're a service-based business, don't go, my cost doesn't go up. Honey, you sell raw material too, and it's an hour. you're selling your time, and you can't get time any more than somebody can get free raw materials for their product. So I don't care what you are. You are being a consultant, you sell another hour, you're engaging in another hour of your time. So your raw materials time, right? So as your sales goes up, your cost of goods goes up pretty parallel. You maybe eke out a little bit of economies of scale and discount, but not much. So every time you sell another dollar, it costs you another, what, 50 cents, 25 cents, whatever your cost of goods are, right? Well, then you get to a point where in order to sell these many widgets, you've got to hire on people, you've got to do all this. So that means that the overhead starts going up. It's going to go up a little bit more jaggedy because there's a certain thing where you look at capacity and asset utilization, but it's still going to go up, right? And so if you have too low of a selling price, every time you increase your sales, your cost of goods is going up. Then people, and this is how it happens, right? They go, okay, I see this on a daily basis. And literally, guys, it brings me to tears what I see. And I see it too much. And I told Sadie I wasn't going to lecture, and Sadie, I'm lecturing. Okay. So what happens is, and I see it so well and I understand it that I can speak to it on a level that many other people don't understand, is that somebody starts a company, they may start it, and it's just a few things being sold, farmers market, what have you. They're doing all their own work themselves, etc. They haven't priced any of it in. I have a rule in my models. If you touch it, there's a cost. If you do it, there's a cost. So I look at all cost. Like I said, my CFO series goes through this in detail. So then what happens is they start going into the world and they sell a few things. They sell it not a high enough selling price to cover if they ever need to hire somebody, to cover if they ever need to get office space, if they need to get a new computer, because all they said is, well, that's for free. I just, I don't have rent. I'm doing it on my house and I'm using my computer. That doesn't cost anything. I'll get paid someday. Well, the question is, if the business model can't pay you today, how is it going to pay you down the road? It's not. So as the story goes on, they don't realize it. They have everybody slapping them on the back. You're doing so good. Everybody loves it. You need to expand. Without realizing it, then they start putting on employees. And how do they get the money to do it? It's not from the profits. They go, I'm going to borrow money on my credit card because that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You got to take risk. You got to be passionate. And then they borrow all this money on their credit card, right? So now they got all this debt, and what they're doing is they're using the credit card. I'm going to go slow on this, guys. They're using the credit card or deposits they're getting in to pay the past bills. So they're not paying the bills from the profit. They're not getting enough profit. They're using the credit card not to grow the business like they think, but to actually pay the past bills, right? Eventually, the deck of cards falls. They can't borrow any more money. They eventually do come to me, have a one-on-one. I start looking at the numbers and I look at it and see they were never profitable. And the debt they're carrying is now the debt. And it's just heartbreaking. I had somebody that came to me through SBDC, oh, I don't know, probably 3, 4 years ago. Didn't want to do the homework, didn't want to figure the stuff out. I could already get it instinct it wasn't being sold at a high enough price. Just wanted to chat. And I said, I can't chat. It's not numbers, but you need to know the numbers. Well, long story short, came back a couple years later, was having some problems getting loans. All they wanted to do is get more loans. I'm like, nope, you need to look at it. Another year later, had some banker come to me on their behalf and asked if I would speak to them, because they had some loans and they wanted to know, would the government, it was an SBA loan, really repossess their house that they pledged? And I said, yeah, will. Came to me last month. Is there anything I can do to stop them? They're going to take the house. They sent me a letter. Yeah, pay the loan. Close the business down with almost 1 million in debt. I mean, just disgusting. And the disgusting part about it is it could have been identified all along. I have this thing that I said this in my private business with a client one time. I said, you can't buy into your own delusional optimism. You really have to know what the numbers are. And the numbers tell a story. I mean, there is no, absolute truth, if you will, beyond 0 and 1. You can take the numbers and you can get them to tell any story you want. You can either, I did that as a CFO. I could take numbers and make the story look good. I can make the story look bad or tell the truth or whatever. But I know what the truth is. It depends if I'm going to go in front of a banker or for the client. I might make it look a little better. You can do this with numbers without breaking any rules or laws because numbers are able to be manipulated. They just are. And so when business owners are not working with any clarity or honesty on the numbers, all they're doing is telling themselves a lie. And I once said, delusional ignorance will just get you in trouble. As you know, I'm quite a proponent for small businesses. I think that brings you freedom. I stand behind them. If I could change the world, everybody would be back to the candlestick maker and baker, whatever that is, and we'd all be, selling amongst ourselves and working in our own world and being happy with what we're doing and making enough money to pay the bills. The small business and the increase in small business and the entrepreneurship is perceived that it's doing that. But from my looking at so many numbers as I do, I don't see it that way. I see the majority of people jumping in and getting in debt and not realizing that they need to make some changes. I had an interesting story that I'll never forget. I tell this story a lot, but I had a client at SBDC again. I've been through, SBDC's been a client of mine for about 20 years, so I've been around it for a long time. And they came to me and they had a design type business, like interior design business. So they had services as well as the furniture that they sold, right? And I looked at it and said, they had, I don't remember, but it was a good amount of employees, like maybe five or six. And I looked at the numbers and I could quickly assess things just from doing it so long. And I said, you're not selling at a high enough price. You're just not. You're not ever going to have money to return to you guys, the owners. It's not going to happen if you continue to sell at this price. And they told me there's no way I can't increase it. All the clients will go. And what I tell people, and they have a really, really hard time understanding this, that you would be better off losing maybe 50% of your customers, reducing your sales, increasing your selling price, and being profitable because it's not revenue that matters, it's net income. And gross profit is how much is left over, right? So we hold on to these customers thinking if we don't have them, it will harm us when in actually having them is harming us. So back to the story. So I said, you know what? You would be better off losing some of your customers that aren't willing to pay more. And I've done this a million times. I'm just using one of these examples. Well, were too afraid, the common thing. But eventually, as they worked through and saw the spreadsheets, and I started educating them so they understood and they could come up with the numbers on their own. Because I don't tell people, I teach them how to look at their own numbers. It became painfully obvious to them that they could not continue the prices that they had. And they've been in business like 7, 8 years. So I noticed and looking at their documents the next quarter that there was a slight increase. I was like, they had to have increased the selling price. But I don't want to say anything because I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere, right? Well, the next quarter I noticed it again. And then the third quarter, I was like, okay, that's been, 6 months, 9 months now. They're kind of committed. I'm going to bring it up. And I said, you were so afraid to increase the selling price. Your customers didn't go away. What happened? Well, she answered in a way I never would have expected. And she's also been on the show before. It's been some time, probably about 2, 3 years ago. But she said that once she understood the spreadsheet became her boss. She said that before she'd get with the customer wanted to get a discount. It was just her being the business owner. She knew, it was her had the final decision. She was having a hard time, saying no, but it changed her perspective because she had the eyes, in her mind was the spreadsheet. And she said two things changed. One, she knew what she was doing to herself. She knew if she went lower than this gross profit that we identified was needed, that she would actually be harming herself and her partner financially. And the second thing is that she had the spreadsheet kind of be her boss that gave her the validity, almost like a boss saying to a salesperson, you can't sell below this amount. The spreadsheet was saying you can't sell below this amount, right? And so I thought that was really fascinating to see how the knowledge even gave the strength in making statements. And the other thing on this same note, and I've seen this repeatedly with clients, is that when they told their clients they needed to increase the majority of them paid the additional amount. In fact, one client came back to me and said one of his customers said, I wondered how long you were going to be selling at that amount because I thought you were going to go out of business sooner or later. There's no way you could have, right? And this is where, on my last tangent on this, no, I can't promise it's the last. On another tangent, I'm not going to say last. On another tangent, okay, this is one I haven't talked about maybe ever or in a long time. This is where, as small companies, we're harming each other. We are harming each other. Okay, let me tell you why. Because you've got somebody that's selling at a price that they shouldn't be able to sell at, and somebody else is selling and they're taking money out on their credit cards, right? And then what you're doing is you're keeping the prices artificially lower and competing against each other. Let me explain. Let's pretend that today, and I'll make up a story, but it's not a made up story, right? But it's something you can get your head around. Let's pretend that today we find out that the price of oil is going up. We just hear it in the futures market. It hasn't even gone up yet, right? Well, all the airlines in lockstep all increase their ticket price, right? Because it may go up in the future. Now, yeah, a little bit of monopoly, and if I'm not going to go into there. There's a bit to that. There is a bit to that. But more importantly, here's the takeaway. They recognize that if this person doesn't raise the price, it's only going to hurt all of them. And all of them are going to suffer. Now, in their suffering, they're not making as much money as they used to personally, but it's more important to understand this concept because in the suffering for a small company, it means you're not making any more money, you're making less money, you're going more in debt. You don't have the wiggle room. So when we as small companies start competing and if prices go up, I see people that, oh, prices have been going up for 4 years and they never increase their prices. Well, what are you doing, guys? You're just putting that burden on yourself. I see people who sell higher cost items at the same price of a lower cost because they're like, well, I don't want them to have to pay the higher price. It's only harming you. And I can tell you the story doesn't end well because there's a period of time you cannot borrow any more money. So, what do you do if your competitors are selling at a price that is not high enough for you to make money? Because that's why I get asked quite a lot. And first of all, I tell people, let's start out with this and I'm answering the same question, but follow me on this. When I taught at USC, I taught the undergrad. At Pepperdine, I taught the graduate level, but I taught the undergrad at USC. And the students there were always like pre-trained by the time they got to me that all you need is passion and excitement to get into business and you're going to succeed, right? So I knew by the time they got to my finance class, I was going to give them something to remember. I was not going to let them walk out into the world with this belief that isn't true. And so the very first day, these were big classes, I would say, what does it take to be in business? And I still laugh at this because I did it every single semester and I got the same result. People would raise their hand. They were so excited, right? They go, I know. And somebody go, passion. I'm like, no. Customers. No. And they would like slowly, the hands would go down more and more and more. And they would come up with something else. A good product. No. And finally, when they were exhausted and I got their attention, I would put on the board and I would write it on the board. This is what, and Sadie, I'll go slow so you can capture this. This is what it takes to succeed in business. Here's the formula. You have to sell it high enough price, enough product or service. So high enough price, enough product or service to cover the cost to produce and to cover your overhead expense and have money left over for you and reinvestment into the company. That's the only formula for a successful business model. There's no other formula because it's just like personal. If you are not bringing in what has to go out the door, there's no you're going to go in debt. You're going to go bankrupt, right? So businesses aren't any different. So if you can't sell at a high enough price with the quantity you need to sell and the infrastructure to support that sell and the production to support it, you don't have a business model. So first of all, in this, going back to the question, if you cannot sell at a high enough price to be able to pay for the production and pay for the overhead and have money for reinvestment. And it's the whole sentence. You can't just use part of the sentence. You can't say to pay for the production or to just pay. No, it's the full sentence. When I teach my CFO series, I'm like, you got to say the full sentence because you got to. I always say I'm not a football person. I'm not into sports, so somebody can correct me. I think I'll totally get it wrong, right? But like if like think like somebody throws the ball and then somebody catches it and then they have to run in the opposite direction, right? And depending on where you catch it, you got to run all the way through the goal post or something like that, right? Okay. So I'm not a sports person, right? Well, it's like this. It's like, when a sale is made, picture the sale comes in and you catch the ball, okay? You catch the ball. Now you got the ball, you got to run past production, you got to run past overhead expense, you got to run past net income and have some money left over for reinvestment. That's why not looking at the whole formula and aligning everything won't give you the right answer. And this is why the downloaded templates don't give you the right answer because they don't consider all the aspects you need to consider, right? So going back to if you did a model, which I've done a lot, and you look at it and you say, well, based on our cost, there's no way unless we sell it at this amount and the market won't pay this amount. Bottom line, you don't friggin' have a business model. But here's the cool thing. You're still alive. You're still breathing. Get another business model and look at it on paper and go again. You're an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean you have to be married to that concept. So if the concept will never have profitability, why do it? Pick a new one, okay? Like I say, people will leave a 40-year marriage quicker than they'll leave a failing business model. I don't understand it, but that happens, right? So if you have it where it just doesn't work, it just doesn't work, shut it down. Now, if you're selling at a price that's not high enough and you possibly could make it higher, you know what that means, guys? Okay, this is where the lazy butt marketers got to get off their butt and do what marketers are supposed to do. Marketers are supposed to get copy and figure out an audience and a market to sell your product where you can get the selling price you need. Not just, oh, let me take your discounted thing and put you on social media. See, marketing has gotten lazy. The industry, they're thinking they just like make something get known and have exposure. When you think of a big company, does the marketing company, or I say, no, when you think of a big company, think about the marketing department. Does the marketing department set the sales price? No, the CFO does. The CFO comes in and says, okay, we're selling the price for $49.99. That's what we need to sell it at. You get the right copy, the right demographics, you make sure everything aligns so you find the biggest opportunity to sell that out in the marketplace for $49.99. Now the marketer might come back after a while and go, we got so many knockouts off there, we're not really able to get that amount. Okay, let's get rid of that product and try another one. You guys know I'm telling the truth. You know it. You see it in corporate America. So why does that not follow the same formula for small companies? It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. You have to be able to sell it at a high enough price or get a new business model. So that was a long tangent. I think I got all of the things I could say on the discussion on how to correctly come up with your price, but it is a whole process of gathering data, putting it into a model. I look at scenario planning. I determine what price it has to be by the math. I look at just the math. What price is it by the math? What does it have to be, right? So the minute I figure out, okay, we could sell these widgets with this amount of infrastructure and this cost at this dollar amount. Then I turn to the marketplace and look at the feasibility to sell it at that amount. Look at the marketing, right? Look at the feasibility for that. And then I know that's the right selling price because I've done a lot of scenario planning with the modeling. So it's much more than, hey, I think I'll sell this and I'll sell this at this price. Okay, we got anonymous. If I live in California and sell to somebody in Illinois, do I pay sales tax in both states? No, what happens is the sales tax amount required to calculate and collect and remit is dependent upon the address where either the goods were shipped or the services were delivered. Now you're talking about goods, so it's the goods shipped, but I just wanted to say on services delivered as well. Like you could be a CPA working for a client that's located in Illinois, technically those services were delivered in Illinois because the person got the tax return, right? So it's the shipping address, it's the receipt where the services are rendered is the technical term, or where the goods are shipped to. If it's shipped to a distribution, then it's shipped to the end user. It's the end user. It's where are the actual customer client receiving it. Now, if you are shipping it to a retail, you would have a reseller certificate, so you wouldn't be charging sales tax. So the sales tax collection, you said if I live in California, it does not matter. It doesn't matter where the company is. Now, if you look at like a restaurant is delivering the services. In this case, it's a brick and mortar sit down restaurant. It would be delivering the goods in the same place it's physically located. So the sales tax rate is the same as the location. But let's say that that same restaurant started selling goods online. Well, then wherever those goods got shipped would be dependent on the sales tax. So you guys might have remembered very long time ago now. Amazon never charged sales tax when you were buying something, right? And then they started charging sales tax. Well, the reason being is it's like mentioned economic nexus. So what happened is in I think it was 2018, there was a Supreme Court decision that's called Wayfair versus South Dakota. And what happened is South Dakota, like many states, they don't have a state income tax. Instead, they make money off of sales tax. Well, when online sales came into play, it was just a little bit, so it didn't matter. But when a large amount of goods were purchased online, then the residents were going to the local stores paying sales tax, and the coffers were going down, the tax coffers. I think like $1 billion they lost in sales tax, right? So that's when they said, okay, Supreme Court, we want not just nexus, which is a ruling of where you're at. We want economic nexus, which means if somebody has an economic advantage selling into our state, we have the right to request that they collect sales tax and remit to our state based on our rules, right? So they passed it in Supreme Court because Supreme Court said you're not trying to hinder commerce. You're not saying to go back in arrears and collect. You're just saying you got to, collect sales tax from residents, customers within your own state. So once that was passed, South Dakota and many states, and they continued to jump on the bandwagon of saying we follow economic nexus rules. But each of them are different. They're hybrid. Some of them might say when you sell over 100 items, when you sell over 100,000. So you really have to look at where is this being shipped to? What is the address it's being shipped to? What are the rules in that state? And then open a seller's permit, right? Now, in many cases, what people will sometimes do is hire a third party, and Shopify offers you to pay for a third party. There are several, but the two top third parties that are most known, I'm not saying they're good or bad, I'm just saying the most known ones, is Avalar and TaxJar. Now, they will handle that process for you. They tie into the data from like a Shopify, and then they handle it under their seller's permit, right? And so that's where it comes about that they will do, and you got to know they calculate, collect, and remit. By the way, a different story, but the same. So Amazon, when you go through, I think it's called Marketplace Facilitator and Etsy, they both handle the calculate, collect, and remit. You got to look for all three words, right? So there was a client just this week, going back to where I tell people get into trouble. They opened up an LLC, and they didn't pay the 800 a couple of the years, the franchise tax fee. They didn't file the tax return on the Schedule C correctly, because even if an LLC has zero transactions in California, you must file a zero return or it's a failure to file. Well, what happened is they sold some things on Amazon. Amazon remitted correctly, because it was sold in the state of California, the sales tax into the California Tax and Fee Department. They had their EIN because that's how you sign up, right? How I learned about this is they got this nasty letter from the Franchise Tax Board saying it looks like you haven't filed a return. Then they got, another thing about the 800. I saw it was suspended. So, and it said that the data and how they got caught was because of the California Tax and Fee Department. I was like, do you have a seller's permit? And they were like, no. Well, that's when I realized that Amazon, of course, respectfully so, put it into the California tax and fee, which then they checked the database and saw both were not done. I I don't know whether it's just I'm getting more of these clients because I'm kind of the top expert on, letters that people get from the government, or if the government's sending out more letters. I really do think they're doing more. I think they're using more of the computers, maybe AI, to dig into the databases. But in the last 4 months, the quantity of people that are getting letters, getting caught that their LLC is not set up properly, getting caught that they didn't have an office of finance if they're in LA County, a business license, getting caught that they failed to file a return, a zero return, or failed to file their seller's permit. I'm just amazed by the number of letters that are coming out. It's getting scary there. You really got to completely understand what you're doing. Now, if you're a sole prop, you still could need a seller's permit and a business license, but if a sole prop, they're under the radar. They're not having to worry about the 800. They're not having to worry about any of that. And believe me, and I'll talk on it if you guys want, this statement that you guys get that says you got to be an LLC or they're going to take your house away. Okay, it's like everything in life. There's a tiny bit of truth, but it's really not fully true. So many people are being suckered in to getting an LLC and paying the franchise tax fees, getting their information known, etc., because they're buying into something that's not fully true. I can actually go into that more if anybody wants to. By the way, I mentioned, and I have a little note here. I got time. I want to come back to these LLC on state statute. I want to explain something about LLCs. You'll have to tell me in the Q&A or the chat. Did anybody ever heard, I'm sure somebody has, that an LLC is a disregarded entity? I'm sure somebody's heard the disregarded entity. People tell me all the time, yeah, I heard that it's a disregarded entity. And I go, well, what does that mean? They're like, I don't know. I don't know what it means. Well, I'm going to tell you like the quick story so you kind of understand this. So an LLC, basically if you think about it this way, the IRS has like just a couple things on their menu. That's all. They got self-employed person, okay, sole prop, self-employed persons, a partnership, right? And then they have corporations, and the corporations can be either taxed as a nonprofit or a S corp or a C corp, right? So that's all they have on the menu. That's all they have on the menu. Many moons ago, a couple decades ago, real estate investors, and by that what I mean is people who were investing in a huge construction real estate project, they would create these companies, and they didn't have the ability, they didn't want to do a corporation. That's what I'm saying. They didn't want to do a corporation because they were taking and pooling money. If I explain this simple, they were pooling money to invest in a big construction project, and then at the end everybody kind of cashed out and they went on down the road, right? So if they set up a corporation, they got stock, they got equity, that structure wasn't really aligned with what they were trying to do. So they were forming partnerships and everything, but they really didn't have the kind of legal support that they wanted. They wanted to have some kind of legal support because construction projects can go bad, and they didn't want to be, have the same kind of liability you would on an independent partnership type agreement, right? So what they did is they went and knocked on the IRS's doors and said, IRS, okay, here's the situation. We don't want to be a corporation, right? But we want some kind of legal protection. So we got this great idea. It's going to be this company that doesn't have to fill out annual minutes. It doesn't have stock. It doesn't have all that complication that a corporation has, right? But it's got a little bit more legal protection. Isn't it a great idea? IRS doesn't bend the rules. They're like, no. You want some fancy, weird stuff, you go to the state, right? So they went to the state, and that's where LLCs were born. They're by state statute. So the LLC is a hybrid, and I don't mean to freak people out, but legally it's not incorporated. Corporations are incorporated. That's why you'll always hear me say LLC and corporations. I don't group them together. So the LLC has some legal protection, not the same as a corporation in many ways, but it's not like a sole prop, right? Although that protection also is limited as well. It's not like going to take care of your house. It's not the Superman, but let's bear with that as a side note. So in that, they didn't have to do the annual minutes and everything, right? So now the LLC is born. The LLC is born, it exists. So going back to the IRS, because you always have to look at, remember, I'm speaking different languages. How is it legally organized? And then how is it taxed, right? So when the LLC was born, the IRS just takes a huge funnel and makes everything fit into a perfectly aligned funnel. So the IRS disregarded the LLC as an entity. They're like, I don't care. You can be a legal entity, yeah, some friggin' hybrid through the states. We're not even recognizing you as an entity. That's what they're saying. From a tax perspective, if you are a single member LLC, we will tax you the same as a sole prop. If you're a multi-member LLC, we will tax you the same as a partnership. In other words, if you're a single member LLC, we will tax you as a self-employed person, which means how you're paying in self-employment taxes. If you're a multi-member LLC, we will tax you as self-employed persons based on the percentage of ownership, right? So this is why an LLC is a disregarded entity. This is also why when people say I formed an LLC to be able to get some tax benefit, there is none. There is none. It's taxed the exact same way. So that's why you'll hear me say an LLC, there's no tax advantage to form it unless you get a high enough profit that it makes it sense to be taxed as an S corp, but you got to be down the road a bit on that. There is some legal protection, and in some cases it makes sense, but in many cases it does not. If I'm doing web design, why do I need some legal protection, et cetera, you know? So it really, you have to look at it and have it understood, et cetera. Okay. Brenda, I don't know if I can answer your question in the minutes I have. You have a long-term acute care facility um, to do PRN work. So it's public relations. And I asked to speak with someone in administration or HR regarding a contract. What I was asked was to send them a W-9 first. Okay, yeah, you're asking about W-9. So I'm going to explain this in a backwards way to go into it. When you're an employee, you get a W-2. And remember being an employee, guys, you got that W-4 document and it says, are you married? How many deductions are you getting? Remember, you had to fill out something. Well, when you're not an employee, you're an independent contractor, your company, I have to do W-9s all the time. The W-9 is a form that anybody that's going to do business with you will ask for, especially in the accounting, because it gives the company that's going to pay you any money your company name, your EIN, or your social security number if you're a sole prop, or your name, and it gives the address to send the 1099. Because if you pay over 600, you have to send the 1099, and so it's giving you the information so when they reach that threshold, they already have it. So it's very common to get a W-9. Sometimes it's before the contract, but the administration may be preempting it to make sure they don't miss getting the W-9. So there's nothing completely wrong to that situation. It's just usually asked when the agreement has been made and a payment process is in place. So you could say, be glad to send it. I have it here. Let's make sure first I sign the contract so I make sure we're going to be doing business together, and then I'll make sure I give it to you. So hopefully that makes sense, Brenda. Please do talk about a DBA. Let's see, I lost that. Being covered with general inserted to protect business and personal. So when you say a DBA, so first of all, Mary, I want to correct something on this. DBAs are just names that either you would get if you have the desire to do financial transactions in a name other than your surname. I'm sole prop and I want to call my company greatest company on earth. I got to have a DBA so I can have somebody write a check, greatest company on earth, and put it into the bank account. Now, I'm an LLC. My name's Business Simply Put. If I wanted to have a part of my company be Tax Simply Put and have people write a name to it and write that and put it into the bank account, I got to get a DBA. So people say I'm a DBA. No, you're not a DBA. Legally, you're a sole prop, you're a partnership, you're an LLC. A DBA is just a name that you're able to take financial transactions in other than your surname or your corporate name. People say this wrong all the time and it gets them in trouble, so I try to clarify it. But what you're talking about is being a sole prop. Now, whether you're a sole prop or an LLC, I'm not big on insurance. I'm not one of those overinsured people, but errors and omissions, that's ERROR, and omissions with an E, it's called E and O insurance, professional insurance. This is the key, guys, because What happens is most people don't take you to court. It's just not worth the time. Like if I did a web design and it was $5,000, I have to go small claims court. I'm not going to bother with that, right? Say it was over 10,000, I'd have to get a lawyer. You just these things don't make it to court. But there could be what's called a discovery phase where people actually, hire a lawyer to go through a process to see if there's a court case possible, right? And this costs you money. It's not like you're like, oh, thank God I got an LLC, so but somebody else is paying that bill. No, it's out of your pocket anyway, right? And so having errors and omissions, a lot of it will cover the discovery phase. It's not a very expensive insurance. I would rather be a sole prop with errors and omissions than an LLC without it if I was worried about being sued. Okay. So errors and omissions is a lot of times the best option. Now, people act like, okay, you're going to get sued and they're taking away a house. Remember, somebody has to sue you for a large enough amount and be justified by the courts for you to have to pay them to force your house to be sold. I mean, it's such a long shot. Now, if you pledged your house as collateral, okay, bank loans, yeah, lease, real estate, that could be. But if I got sued and my house I'd have to be sued for something that was such a high amount that I couldn't pay. And if I get sued for that high amount, especially if I'm doing web design, there's no chance on it. But if I'm doing some kind of consulting, they would have to show that I had malfeasance, that I did something that was completely wrong. And that's not going to be covered by the LLC anyway, right? So you really got to look at the reality of that. Okay, Sadie, I can't believe it. More questions, but we're out of time. So what did I say? I talk for 2 minutes or 60 minutes, and you always tell me, Lori, you're going to talk for 60 minutes.
I mean, you talked over 60 minutes and you could be going for another hour. I heard the voice there while I was like, Lori, you need a little drink right there.
I know. I was like, I'm dying on the vine, guys. Oh, one more question, please. Okay, one more
It's like an
question.
encore. We're the lighters, Lori.
I know. I'll look at the anonymous. I'm not going anywhere. Sadie's not going anywhere. Let's see. Is there an advantage to launching my business by the end of the year? Should I rush for income tax purposes? Do I get any benefits in California? Should I wait until January and not rush? Okay, anonymous, I can answer this really quickly. Taxes has nothing to do with it. When you got enough money and you know what the hell you're doing and you're sure it's profitable, start the company. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to think about anything. You're filing an LLC. If you wait until January, you won't be responsible for the franchise tax board fee for this year. That has something to do with it. Too many people are really it's funny, guys. I don't mean to pick on you, anonymous, but it's the stupidest questions I get asked. People have no money. They're not making any money. They're asking me how to save on taxes. The other day, I had this person making no money. I could tell his business model was a mess, and he's like, "I want to talk about tax saving strategies." So I got through him this way. I go, "You're doing great, man. You've got the best tax strategy I've ever seen in my life." And he goes, "I don't have any." I go, "I know you don't have any money. You don't pay taxes on no money. Come on." I have billionaire clients. I've known a billionaire client. I had many multimillionaire clients. They don't worry about taxes like companies that make no money do. I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, guys. Make some friggin' money and worry about taxes, okay? That's my answer to that. Sorry, but that's one of my pet peeves. We got to look at it and be serious. I mean, like literally, people are not making money and worried about tax. I'm like, worry about making some money, okay? That's more of a priority. So I think I got that. I got all the questions. Sadie, am I missing anything?
Well, you're missing one. There's that. Is there an advantage as long? Oh wait. Oh, so they went on that one. You know what? I had maybe it's a quick one where there was a question about if we should also worry about county lines because you know how we were talking about states and then like someone said, well, what about county lines? Is that something we need to worry about with taxes and things like that?
Well, yes, you do. I wouldn't say worry. I don't like the word worry. We don't want to worry, right? But county lines, and I'm going to call it a different word. I'm going to call jurisdictions. We're talking about the same thing. Like
Yes.
Long Beach has a jurisdiction, right? So I'm going to say jurisdictions, right? Jurisdictions are who create the rules regarding business license, right? And like if you're in the LA County and it's kind of got jaggedy lines, so not everybody in LA County, but I'm just going to say that generically. If your address on your LLC or your address on your tax returns, the address you're doing business, your home address, whatever it is, that address is in LA County and you don't get a business license, in fact, the Office of Finance is one of the biggest sender outs of bad letters right now, which is starting a whole nasty thing. So their business license, for example, are $75. And then every February, you have to state what your revenues are because they charge an additional percentage on revenues. But here's the catch. They've had this on the books for a long time as a small business exemption. If you have less than 100,000 in revenues and you have a business license already taken out and you filled out the form in February, you don't have to pay any taxes. When you don't, which is what they do now, and they're going through the Secretary of State and Franchise Tax Board, they're picking up the addresses. You get a nasty letter from them saying failure to have a business license, failure to have done the renewals, and then they want to know what your revenue is, and then they charge penalties on it. So jurisdictions have permitting rights on business license, and business license today are also home occupancy permits. So yes, you do have to be conscious of it. And can you guys see why I keep lecturing why just asking ChatGPT what I have to do to incorporate doesn't give the right answer? Because there's so many different so many different governments, so many different government regulations that are occurring. I mean, you have the California tax and fee, that's a seller's permit. You have the jurisdictions on the business license. Then you have the Department of Health if you're a bakery. You have the Department of this, the Department of that. You're making baby clothes. You have another department that determines the fabric that you can use. Then you've got the legal entity. Then you got the tax. Then you got the state tax. Then you got the IRS tax. I don't think I'm going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. Okay. So this is why, in fact, I had something the other day that I wrote down that was really true. And I happen to have it here because I was thinking about this. I said, the um the more complicated a subject is, it's like it's interesting because like this is a really complicated subject and it seems like social media makes you believe it's simple and has one answer. And so when you look at it and you say, okay, there's a lot of variables, a lot of like tangents down on this, that's when you got to really look at it and say, hey, I have to definitely get better answers because it is very complicated. So so that would be it. Okay, I got one more thing that I was going to show you guys at the beginning and I forgot. So those that are still straggling along. So Sadie, you know how Babu has a stroller and I push her in the stroller and everybody remembers me pushing Babu in the stroller, right? Okay,
Hmm.
I got to do some modifications on this. But Babu's stroller got destroyed on the beach. I've been dragging that thing on the beach. It was really hard. And so I decided I got to get a new little cage to go in it. But I decided that Babu needed some four-wheel drive. This is Babu's new ride. Isn't that friggin' hilarious?
Oh my God, it's like little Terminator Kitty or something. Like I'm ready for like Robo paw arms to come out of that thing.
I know that is her carrying cage for the bike, and so it's small. So we got one coming today that's going to fit in the whole thing. So I'll have my beach blanket. But we took it on some rough road to see how the four wheels work, and you could see she was totally, totally in it. Yeah. So yeah, and she hates rough roads. So yeah, Brenda, she looked a little grumpy because she doesn't like when the rough roads get. In fact, I took her four wheeling on the beach, and it's really funny because she starts out and she's like all happy, and then after we go over all the bumps, she's like, oh my God. But anyway, I had to share that with you. So once again, I talked through everything. I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. I wasn't thinking I was going to be here this long, but thanks for the great questions, the great conversation. I saw there was a lot of wonderful chats in the chat. Everybody have a happy and safe holiday. Sadie, did I miss anything? Anything in the chat I needed to know about before, and anything you'd like to say, Sadie? Would you like to say some goodbye things?
I'm just like, you know what? This is the best way to kick off Thanksgiving. I think we know we're all in our own little individual bubbles, but then we come here, I'm like, you know what? This sets me straight for the day. And now I'm gonna go into my holiday. I'm gonna think of our pets, our loves, and like we said, I'm grateful for my small biz community, Lori. Look what you started here. It was just like this little one-off thing you were gonna start. And look, we have a whole little like village over here.
Oh, I know. I mean, if people are coming on the day before Thanksgiving and stay just to hear me talk about nothing, that's pretty impressive. So I'm glad I didn't cancel today and I decided to come here and see what you wanted to chat about. And you guys asked great questions and I feel like we had a wonderful conversation. So thank you so much for your involvement. So Sadie, I'll click off. You're going to stay on like always so they can grab everything. And thank you. I saw you put Ashley's show in there. That's great. That's a great one to watch. I think there was a lot of really insightful things in that show. So do try if you need some watching of something over the holidays, check out that past show if you haven't seen it. So for me, I'm going to say much love to everybody, my frequent flyers, those that are here every week. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I will see you next week once again on Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody. Bye, Sadie.
Hi, mamas. Alrighty, guys. So we know the drill. I'm gonna stay on for a little while. I just been putting in all of Lori's upcoming webinars. I put in the lady cakes, so you guys can check that one. That was when we were talking about cost of goods services sold. But as you can also see, we have some awesome webinars happening. So definitely just click away, sign up. As you know, there is no like attendance or any of this type of stuff. So if you want to sign up and you can't make the session, no worries. No one's gonna come and be like, "Well, you didn't show up." Just like I said, just sign up. And maybe you can just like catch a little bit of it. But as you can see, with lots of great info, we always have these sessions for you. Let me put in that small biz info for you because I'm thinking that everybody here is a client of the SBDC, but if you are not, please sign up because as you can see, Lori is an amazing business advisor. We have several other amazing business advisors, and all of our business subject matter experts are in different fields. So if you want to be in marketing, AI, permitting, real estate, I mean, like anything that you can think of for your business, the Small Business Development Center is here to help you. It's no cost to you. As we said, these are your tax dollars at work, so please use the resources that are available for you. And these are one-on-one consultations, and most of them are virtually. If you can't do the drive, we know how traffic is in LA. So hey, like I said, sign up, get connected, and let's help one another grow our small businesses. So on that note, I'm going to put myself on mute because I feel myself going very kumbaya over here. And I was like, oh, I'll bring it down a second. But as you can tell, I'm very passionate about the work we do here. Love you all. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.